welcome back, everybody, to Handcrafted. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. For those of you, if this is your first time, welcome. Handcrafted is a conversation series where we have informational and inspirational conversations with all types of creators and executives about how they've come to build their crafts, how they've come to be who they are in this world. And today we have the most special guest by far. I have now nicknamed her my fairy godmother. She speaks so much power into my life, Chantel's life. It's actually Chantel's aunt. We'll just say Miss Myriam. We'll leave the last name out for now.
Okay, that works.
We'll come back to it. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
This is incredible. I feel like we've been talking for 72 hours.
Yes, and we kind of have been talking for 72 hours.
It's not just a feeling, but it was so, when Chantel brought it up that, you know, you should come and be a guest, I was upset that I didn't think of it first.
It's okay. Give you credit right now.
Yeah, I'll take credit. We can edit out that I didn't come up with this. But no, again, thank you so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
You're a busy woman. You're a godly woman who has come to bless us on this podcast. So Handcrafted, we usually talk to people about how they built their craft, and usually tied to their profession. You know, we have executives, we have marketing executives, we have people who work in music supervisors. We want to talk about a little bit of that with you, but I feel like we have much more impactful and powerful things to speak about. But we'll start where we always start. And I ask each guest I have, the first question is always, I want you to bring me back. And I want to start at a very specific time in your life. And it'll allow me and also our audience to kind of piece together how we got here. So I want you to think back to Miss Myriam, probably before you were Miss Myriam.
Okay.
I want to talk about Myriam at 7 years old.
Wow, okay.
What does the world look like to you? First of all, where are you? Who are you? What do you see? What's around you? What do you remember? What was that like for you at age 7? What was your world?
So 7 years old, I am the child. I'm first generation. I'm very aware of the fact that my mother and father are Haitian, that French is spoken in the house. English is not really spoken in the house, spoken outside the house. Interesting enough, you say 7. That was first grade. And I vividly remember kindergarten, first grade, because I remember being thrust into an English-speaking school, and I was very aware that I didn't really speak English well. But I clearly picked up on English at some point.
So you got really good at it.
Yeah. So I'm very aware that my grandmother will soon be coming to live with us. And I'm very aware of the cultural differences that are around me. So my grandmother eventually, when she came to live with us, I can't remember the age, she's with us. She goes to church. In the summers, I'm going every day to church with them. My mother and father both work. We are living in Washington, D.C. We are living in an area that is considered affluent. But I don't know that my mother and father, who both worked for international organizations, are really saving every penny. But I'm in the second grade, and I'm already aware of the fact that culturally, it's not cool to be anything other than American. I'm very aware of that. You know, not too much is said. I know there are differences. I know that the cultural differences mostly come up with food.
Got it.
I noticed that when my mother sends me to school with lunch, it can be rice and beans, or, you know, some kind of, patty, like they would say Jamaican beef patty, or empanada, something like that. So they're, and these kids are not eating the same thing. So I'm kind of getting teased. It's going to get worse as I get older, but I'm aware that, and I don't want to say that I felt the need to fit in at all. There was something about the strength and resolve of my parents that I didn't feel like, I was just kind of figuring it out, but I knew there was a difference, and I kind of felt it wasn't cool to be different. But, right now it has too much hasn't revealed itself. We're still like in the second grade.
Okay. So that's interesting, where that's the experience of a lot of children who are probably the first of their family to be born in America, right?
Correct.
So
that would be my story.
with that, it can go a couple of different ways, right? You can either kind of insulate yourself within your family and the culture of your family. You could branch out or try to fit in a way that's inauthentic.
Very
so
true.
As you're at this very young, impressionable age, where, I guess, like, what does your circle look like outside of your family? Do you have friends? Do you have maybe cousins or siblings or anybody else that you're kind of hanging with and that are influencing you? Or are you close to your family more so than, like, close to your parents, I should say?
So I would say I was close to my parents, not so attached. I'm very different than, I have 2 younger brothers, so I'm the firstborn.
Okay.
I'm also, there is it's a very male-dominated culture,
Yeah.
as most of the West Indian cultures
Yeah.
are. But I would say I was a tomboy at all, but I was very outspoken. It was very clear. I feel sorry for my parents, even as I say this. I was extremely outspoken.
Yeah.
My mother said, I can't even believe I'm telling you this, but I'm just going to go for it.
Thank you.
I was very young, maybe 3 or 4, and my parents had a friend, and the lady had a way of laughing that was really kind of outrageous. It sounded like fanatical.
Yeah.
And my mother tells me the story that she was an odd-looking woman. So we were all in the car one day, and she had this hysterical laugh. And I said to her with, no reservation, "You look like a monkey."
Wow.
I said this to my mother's friend. I mean, my parents were mortified. And my thing was, I was just saying what I saw.
Right.
So even though this is totally not flattering for me, I'm giving myself a pass as a very young person.
Yeah.
They must have raised me in a way. Again, my parents were musicians. They, the piano was in our house, and so there was music all around: classical music, jazz, compa, salsa. There was all kinds of musical influences. But there was a freedom that I had, very different from my parents, and maybe it was somewhere back in, some generationally, some member. But I was very outspoken, unlike anyone in my family.
So outspoken in a Haitian household.
Yes, as a woman.
As a woman.
Yes.
And
very
the firstborn.
unconventional. Yes.
So we let's talk about that a little bit, and just Haitian culture and West Indian culture in general, right? Because you've gone to build quite a career for yourself, but when you start out in those, when you're going to school, like, there's a focus on your academics, right?
Yes,
like
very much so.
That's at the forefront, right? So they want to make sure that you're doing well there, that you're a respectable young woman. So while you're in that phase in the house, like, how are you figuring out who Myriam is? Like, what are you, like, what are your interests? Like, what are you being gravitated towards in that time outside of the requirements of being a West Indian child? So
that's an excellent question. So I would say this. Education is implied.
Yeah.
It is implied. No one has to, so by this time, as I'm getting older, my parents didn't believe in this thing of, like, spending the night. I felt like I was being tortured. Like, this is the thing Americans do. They go spend the night
at their friend's house. Yep.
And at the point that I still can't spend the night, but I can go down the street to the girl who lives down the street, whose mother, is a stay-home mother, which my mother was not, so that was evident too, that, when you do well, the mother gets to stay home, right?
Yep.
And my mother didn't.
Yep.
They both had to work just to make ends meet, right?
To keep up with the one.
Right, but we're all living in the same neighborhoods, but the economics isn't the same at all.
It's different. It's way different.
So I figured that out. And so the father is a doctor, or, in this case, the girl's father's a doctor.
Yep.
And so I go out after school, let's say, to kind of hang out. And there is a constant emphasis from the American parents. You have to do well. You have to work twice as hard to get, half as far. And this is constantly iterated, which I found as I got older to be traumatizing to a very young person.
Absolutely.
Like, that's a lot.
And these are, just to be clear, these are young Black Americans we're talking about. They have to work twice as hard,
right,
or 10 times as hard to get half
as far. And
yes.
This is what they're telling their children at 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yes.
So at the point that they're saying this, I'm interpreting this as, what you're saying is that I'm already ill-equipped,
right,
or I'm not enough, or this is because I don't hear this language in my house.
Right.
The other thing I notice is when report time comes, they hand over the report card to the parents. They are rewarded for how many A's they get
doing well.
and how well. Right. This is never going on in my house. This doesn't happen. I hand my father my report card, and he says, "Yes, as it should be."
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yes, that's what. Carry on. This is expected of you. Or I did my schooling. You're not doing this for me. This is for you. This is not your house. This is my house. Right? So basically, I'm thinking I'm really like a homeless kid without my parents, you know. So from a young age, you're doing what you're supposed to do and what is expected of you. You are not being rewarded for it because you're not doing it for me. You're doing it for you.
Right.
So instantly I knew that, you know, this is something that was, again, expected of me. So I also was told, you know, by my parents, you know, make sure that you make your mark. Make sure you make your mark. You know, that there's a purpose for you. You have to find that purpose. You know, we've done our job. Our job is to make sure that you do well.
Yeah.
But also what's happening is as I'm going into these other households, and of course their food is different, there is the need now for me to assimilate because I'm living in two cultures. When I go home, there's one culture. When I leave and go to school, I'm, you know, it's, I think they're, you know, the word that they call it, code switching.
Yeah, code
Right.
switching.
Right. So you, and you know, as people of color, period.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about the code switching within the American culture.
Right.
From, you know, your family, your friends,
Right.
going to, let's say, a corporate environment or any
You're really
place.
going from a different culture, nationality, background
Absolutely.
to another
Right.
culture.
So it's not just person of color, you know, West Indian to American, which is all within a black circle racially. We're talking, you know, there's also when you just in the corporate structure, the blacks at work and the, you know, the whites at work.
Right.
So there's just, it's, yeah.
So while you're doing this, right? So when you're at home, it's one way.
Right.
When you're in school, it's another way.
Correct.
So are you leaning towards another side, or are you just becoming a melting pot of traditional West Indian Haitian culture, but then because you're still technically learning American culture,
Correct.
right? At the end, so you're learning American culture. You're becoming more quote unquote Americanized.
Correct, for sure.
How does that translate in the home?
Okay, so great questions, I might add.
Thank you.
So I will say this. I am realizing that I better learn this American culture quickly because if I'm going to advance, you know, in my mind, later I'm going to find out that all these nuggets that my parents have gave me are what is that's what's going to help me, that's going to sustain me and thrust me into this, you know, into this American system. But I can't see that as a young person.
Right.
As a young person, my parents are cool, but they can't help me.
Right.
They don't understand.
Right.
You know, there's an incident that's coming in third grade where I'm called the N-word. I go to the beach with actually I had, you know, there was a melting pot of friends.
Okay.
So I had a white girlfriend and I would go to her house. Her parents have Polish background.
Okay.
And they wanted to go to the beach. We went to the beach with them. And it's just me with this white family. And they never made me aware of my color. So it was fine. We go to a beach in Maryland. And someone calls me the N-word. And I was so overwhelmed. But I saw that they were more overwhelmed because they didn't know how to handle it. And immediately they went to explain that, you know, this is not who we are.
Right.
But the parents were really liberal and they were great about explaining.
Gotcha.
I go home and explain this to my father because I am humiliated and I'm embarrassed and I know this is a black thing. But I fail to understand that the N-word is a word my parents are not familiar with.
Right.
So it's like just saying any generic word.
Right.
You know, it's like saying anything.
It doesn't have all of that weight that it has here.
It has no weight.
Yeah.
It has none. So they are not living my life.
Right.
They are not in school where we're told you can't say that word.
Right.
Where every time that word is said, there's a reaction. They have no emotional, you know, there's nothing emotionally that comes from them when that word is said. No reaction.
Right.
So at this point, I go to my father. I said, hey, you know, they've called me this word. And my father saw that it upset me. And he was more angry at my being upset.
That it upset you.
Right.
Then,
Because he said, are you that word? Is that who you are?
yeah.
Why are you bothering with somebody's opinion of you? Someone will always have an opinion of you.
Yeah.
This is not your problem.
Yeah.
Your problem is if your problem and my problem with you is, do you feel that you're that word? Because if you don't feel that you are that word, this is all inconsequential.
Right.
I need you to move forward because you have to finish your education.
Right.
You know, you have to make sure that you have the tools that you need to go forward and to be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
My parents wanted us to be able to take care of ourselves. That was their whole purpose of leaving their old country to come here, you know, so that we would have other opportunities. So basically he's saying, is this emotional moment that you're having going to deter you from the reason that we came here anyway,
Right.
to give you a better way of life?
Give you a better life. Right.
So.
And so what I'm getting from not only that story, but just the way you speak about your parents and what they were trying to instill in you, and, you know, from the make your mark to all of these little nuances are kind of giving you your differentiation factor, right? This is making Myriam different from her classmates.
Absolutely.
And what you're also getting instilled is a level of independence, right? So as you're now going through your teenage years into college, and like that's when I feel like people, I don't want to say struggle, but people toil the most with identity. So,
And so did I.
I was going to say, so I want to, what were your, because you're still living in two different worlds, right?
Correct.
So as you're continuing to have more and more experiences in these different worlds, some people would say you're probably becoming more defined in your identity, but in actuality, you could actually be becoming less defined and becoming more of a melting pot, and you're seeing different things. So for you, what would you say helped you with your identity along the way? And what was your identity literally at that time? Like going into college, I would say, let's just say 17, 18 years old.
So I'm going to take you to high school.
Okay.
Because I'm now in elementary school, and I'm like 7th, 8th grade, about to go to high school, and now I make the decision. And by the time I also was very involved in the arts. By this time, I've been playing piano since I'm 8 years old, classical piano. I've been dancing, you know, I've been doing classical ballet for a long time, and that would take me into the, you know, through high school.
Yep.
So I'm getting involved, but I'm really grabbing on to the American culture because I feel that I now have to define myself as a Black American because they have a distinct identity and they're not really interested in, you know, what my Haitian background is. I'm not going to, I've only been to Haiti once since then. So while I'm surrounded by Haitian and every day is Haitian food, I now decide that I really need to embrace this other culture because this culture at home is not going to help me. I need to really look like everybody else. So I don't know if I'm denying being Haitian, but I can tell you I wasn't talking about it.
Got it.
I wasn't. If you ask me now, who are you? I will say I'm Haitian American. Some people would say that's not accurate. You're of Haitian descent. But because my mother and father are Haitian, because that is the culture that I feel I was born to, I identify as a Haitian. And other people would say that's inaccurate.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody, you know, this is a culture of labels. So
Right.
everyone has their own label.
Right.
But as I'm going into high school, as I'm going into college, I decide I need to leave this Haitian thing on the back burner. It's not really going to be useful to me. So, and I don't say I wanted to assimilate like it was, you know, denying.
Right.
It really was, I need to kind of learn the ropes of how these folks do it.
Right.
So I go through high school, I check with a couple of people, and I go to an all-white, all-girls high school. You know, I would say is on the elite side of high schools. I tell my parents, I must go to this school because it's the best. I've heard it's the best. I want to go to this school. So I go to the school. First, you talk about racism, it was right there in your face.
Yep.
These are young white women whose parents are very wealthy. and who are not, embarrassed to say whatever they're going to say. But I also learned some other things, that a lot of these young girls are being raised by nannies.
Yeah.
Their parents aren't really around. They don't have a sense of family. So while they are very well off financially, I also notice there's a lot of emotional instability.
Yeah.
So I realized they're not better off. So I learned right then and there, money did not solve problems.
Right.
And I'm glad I learned that young, because that's going to help me as I make more money in my career.
Right.
That money is not what I'm chasing.
Right.
I saw firsthand that money was not good, in that it was used to cover up, to help these parents who felt guilty that they weren't
Right,
around.
right.
And I saw these young people miss their parents and miss growing up with that family setting,
Right.
because their parents would just phone it in with money.
It's like the father who buys a bunch of gifts but never comes to anything, or is never present in the home.
And so then I was not ashamed that I lived in a much smaller house, because I had my parents' presence and, more importantly, their attention.
Yeah. So you're learning what real value is.
Very young. And as I get older, I want to do something great for my parents. I make a determination very young that I'm very determined to get my education, to do well, to go far, so I can give my parents all of these material things.
Right.
And as I'm going into college, leaving high school, I tell my father one day, it's a very vivid memory, I say to him, Dad, when I get older, I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to buy you this Mercedes-Benz. And he said, I don't want it. And I was so offended. I said, but it's going to be free. I'm going to give it to you for free.
Give it to you.
Yeah. And he said, but that's not what is important to me. I don't value that. And that incensed me. He said, I don't value that. What I value is you getting the best education, again, that you can have, so that you can have options, and that when I leave this earth, that you will be able to sustain yourself and to thrive. And this changed the trajectory of my life, because I realized from then on, this thing of money was not important to my parents.
Right.
It was, you don't live to work, you work to live.
Right.
And I got that young. And this is pivotal for me as I go into college. So I'm still driven academically. I'm still driven to do well, because I can see the end. I can see at the end of the tunnel. But I'm realizing that the girls and the guys who are more into the social life, into this, they're wrapped up in the culture, they're living a different experience. So I decide to pledge a sorority, because this seems like the thing to do.
So does that feel
And also, I didn't have sisters. So I thought
which makes a difference.
Yes, I didn't have sisters. And so I thought this was going to be a sisterly bond.
Yeah, and there's a different kind of mindset of not only being an only girl, but being the only girl and the oldest.
Yes.
And that...
Sure, they would have preferred a boy, but
I
got the spot, so...
So, even having that mindset as you enter college, you want to pledge in a sorority so you can get that feeling of sisterhood, another thing that you didn't have in your household. So what was that experience like for you? Was it what you thought it would be? Was it, what people assume it to be from, movies and horror stories? Or
many horror stories, I'm sure. Go ahead, yes.
So I'm saying, so did you, for you, did it fill that void for you? Or was it just something that once you got something that you wanted, you're just like, oh, this is cool to have as well?
This is cool to have as well. So I don't think that unless you really go through the pledge process, you can have it's all the wonderful things that they say about it, and all the horrible things they say about it.
It is.
So it's literally both. I think it just depends on what your individual experience is.
Right.
It could be that the pledge process is beautiful, cohesive, bonds you together, and maybe you have tension with people in the sorority after that. It could be, devastating up front and ends up being some, beautiful experience down the road.
Right.
So it is all things wonderful and all things challenging at the same time. It really depends on the chapter, the school, the culture of the school, the culture of the people who pledge you, how they were pledged, depends on how they pledge you, who's willing to step in to be the adult in the room when the pledging is going on. It's many things. But as you get past, the trauma of college, the trauma of acceptance, the trauma of grades, all that, and grades was never a problem for me. As you have to balance this out with who is it that you want to be, because the most difficult thing that I saw, I was specific about it. I really wanted the sisterhood. But just because you want the sisterhood, that doesn't mean everybody's in it.
Else
right.
wants it.
So if it's your platform to be noticed, if it's your platform for affirmation, which, by the way, could also be sports. I don't want to just, hang it on the hat of the sororities and fraternities. If you're doing something other than for the love of doing it, you will be devastated that it will not fulfill you.
Absolutely.
If you hang your hat on that. Because at some point, everyone has to graduate, minus the people who stay in college for 8 years because the life of being Greek means more to them.
Yeah, and they finally found something that it's almost like a false fulfillment, right? In that sense, especially when you're not doing things for the right reasons, or you're not doing something for the love of it or for what it was designed for, right? Because you can get other things, and I think not only does it apply to sports, it applies to jobs. It applies to just anything that you have to go outside of yourself to obtain. So
I must tell you also that I was in the University of Maryland Gospel Choir.
Okay.
That's University of Maryland. It was pledging a sorority and being in the gospel choir, it was like the perfect balance.
Yeah, so you had your Jesus.
I had Jesus, and then I had stepping.
You had
stepping and Jesus.
And then
not necessarily goes together at
No.
all.
It could mesh at times, but
Yes.
so you have the culture of a choir as well, right? So
So it's like a family, and and there were people in the choir who were pledging. And I can tell you, in the choir, we were not judged for any of it. And I was really clear by the time that I went into my senior year. I basically, I did not do a lot of things with the sorority because I was trying to graduate.
Right.
I was very clear about that.
Right.
But I did notice that, my stock went up.
You had a higher profile.
But we're young. I mean, we're looking for ways to define ourselves. We're looking for, and certainly when you're Greek on a PWI, on an all-white campus, you are definitely going to stand out.
You stand out, absolutely.
Absolutely. And so just bringing it back to just as a black woman, you want your group. And honestly, one of the great things about having, being in a sorority, most people don't go back to their colleges, at their alma maters at all, because they don't feel, during homecoming.
Right.
But the Greeks come back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're in the marching band, if you're in any kind of organ, the gospel choir comes back. You really have to be engaged in something in college in order to feel like you had people. All of it helped.
So you have sisterhood now. You have a feeling of belonging, but so you have this social life, right? But education is still first. Like your main focus is still graduating.
Yes, I have to get out.
So as you're now senior year, we're speaking about, and you're about to approach the real world. Where do you want to work? What do you want to do? What do you have a plan as far as like how you're going to attack your career, or are you just kind of saying, I'm going to just let the chips fall where they may? I'm going to put my best self out into the world and let it come back to me? Or were you one of those people who needed a plan and needed a defined strategy to get to what you wanted to get to?
So I started off, I was a music major. I studied opera. I started at Catholic University. And I really saw a lot of racism in the classical world, as I had seen in ballet, all things that world. So quickly I said, I'm going to need something in case this music thing doesn't work out. Little did I know there was racism in every field, including television. I could say especially in television. So I was going to escape this, so I had to find a way to get past it. But I did want something to fall back on if the music thing didn't work out. So that's when I transferred to Maryland.
Okay.
And I did music. I made music my minor, and then I decided to major in radio, television, and film.
Okay.
But that's where I found my jazz teachers. So I just started doing jazz, still taking, I had already fulfilled my requirements. And so I just always radio, television, film. So I just started, that was great because that's where I really learned to create. I still did kind of my music on the side. I still sang in the gospel choir. But now I'm saying, okay, so I'm getting ready to graduate, and I do not have a plan except to apply everywhere. Just apply
That's
everywhere.
pretty much every kid's plan.
And I can tell you, because I did not get a lot of responses from applying everywhere in television, in communications, radio and television. I just said, I have to get in the door. However I get in the door. So one of the things that one of the I interned at a radio station, and someone said something to me, which is why I'm really careful how I speak into the lives of young people. You have no idea one thing how detrimental
How
it can be.
affect, yes.
It can. So I remember one of the people at the station who actually brought me in said, "Listen, if you want a career in television, really, you're going to have to go to the middle of nowhere. Do not go to any big city. You will never make it there."
Wow.
But the Haitian in me said, I'm especially going to apply to the New York, to the East Coast, that's it. Because if you're telling me I can't, I know that I can. I will prove you wrong. So I did just that. I just applied everywhere, and I ended up getting a assistant at a radio station.
Okay.
And so I said, I'll take it. So it was right out of college. I had been interning at that station.
So you already knew
everybody,
knew the community, knew the culture.
I just said yes.
Yeah. And so you start especially in that industry, television, radio, as most people do, with an internship into an assistant coordinator type of a role. And at this point for you, do you know ultimately where you what you want to be, like what position, like what's your like dream job, or did you just I'm going to just do the work and land where I land? Did you have a dream job? Did you think that I wanted to do I want to be the executive producer of X show?
So I love saying that I had no idea.
Okay.
I mean, everyone has this plan, and I feel like most people don't have a plan.
No.
I always say there are very few Derek Jeters in the world.
Yes.
There are very few people who say, I'm 6 and I want to play for the Yankees, and very few people. I feel like most people fumble their way. So it was less about what job specifically or ultimate goal. It wasn't about that. It was wherever I land, I'm going to be the best that I can be till I figure out the next move. Everything about it for me was the next move. What is my next? I never look further than the next move. It was more about how do you turn this present situation into a great opportunity. So I'd say, okay, here's where I find myself. I can't move up any further in this organization. There's nowhere for me to go. I was never hung up on nobody looks like me. I never, the thing of they don't like me, there are not enough black people here, none of this affected me. Either they can help me or they can't. Recently, I just said something to a colleague. There's a marketing slogan that goes, some will, some won't. So what? Someone is waiting. So some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting. And it refers to like when you're making cold calls for people, right? So some will say yes to your pitch. Some won't. So what? Another call is waiting. So you don't get hung up in the place where they don't like you, they won't promote you. Instead of holding their feet to the fire, you move on to someone else. Very rarely, very, very rarely will you have the power to change that culture. Maybe you just let them know, they'll realize they lost a good person because they weren't willing to change it. Maybe you'll hope for the person behind you.
And I feel like that philosophy, that to me is the Haitian and not the American.
Wow.
Because in the American sense, right, we're taught to be, very aspirational, right? Like dream big and think big, right? So while that's great, and you want youth and you want people in general to have ambition and you want them to shoot for the stars, too often they get caught in looking at the stars and not what's in front of them.
Yes. And
what people don't understand, especially in whatever career you're building, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you work in radio or television, whether you're a chef, you have to conquer what's in front of you first.
Absolutely.
And you said something so powerful in, I'm going to do the best that I can do with what's in front of me and then worry about my next move. And too often, I think, especially now, like with this platform, we have a lot of young people watching, and with what social media is now and what the views of success are, people can see the big lofty dream in front of them, but they're missing all the steps that it's going to take to get there. So I think having kind of a mechanical approach almost to it, you still have big dreams, you still have aspirations, but you're attacking the next step with vigor. And I just think that's a lost trait or even a lost mindset for people now. So it's obviously gotten you far.
I would say. I would say my slogan is bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. Once you've bloomed, you only bloom once, right? Like you bloom where you're planted. Bloom.
Bloom where you're planted.
Yes, that's a real. I didn't make that up. I've actually found. I heard it.
Yeah.
And then once I was like at a flea market and I saw this little girl made it. I was like, I'll buy that for $100.
Yes.
I'll take it. Bloom where you're planted. This to me is the key to success. You bloom where you're planted, because if that's your focus, you get to enjoy where you are. You get to learn the lessons that you need to learn, and you don't have to relearn them. You only have to learn them once.
Yes.
Because I can't bloom if I'm worried about the next thing.
Yeah.
My growth will be stunted. So
Yeah.
I will go into the next thing with stunted growth. You bloom where you are. And when you have bloomed, then you can look to some other pasture to
Yeah.
replant yourself.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you're replanting yourself, you have to be watered, right? The sun has to shine
Right,
on
the sun has to hit
right,
you.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is about moving too quickly and not blooming well, right? I have another friend that says, if you don't do it that way, then you will suffer a crop failure.
So going into the next situation,
Or next season.
Halfway bloomed, or your roots aren't proper.
Correct.
So then when the sun does hit you, it may die or
Correct.
it may fail.
And then that way you've got to be uprooted.
Yeah.
Seed goes in the ground. And here's the thing about when you go, before you can come up, and this is another thing that a lot of young people don't understand. Before I can see that little sprout come up, I got to go down deep. So just because you think you're not moving, your roots are going deep. And you're going to need that, because when the storm of life comes to crush you, you will be able to withstand that. You will be grounded and rooted.
You need to be rooted.
And that rooting does not just involve your professional career. You better have something spiritually to hold you and ground you when people who don't like you discriminate against you, people who don't like you, and people who do like you look like you. You don't get so caught up in people who don't look like you.
Yeah.
Because people who do like you may hurt you worse.
They may hurt you more. And you've segued us into what I think is probably going to be the most important part of our conversation. We talk about being rooted, right? And it's so important who you are and how you are. Way more important than what you do, what you accomplish, who you know. And, I think there's a huge emphasis on those things now, right? Especially in this culture. But I want to talk about just the effects of being a firmly rooted person, right? How important was it for you, let's just say in your professional career, how important was it for you to be not only, mentally and emotionally rooted in what you were, but also spiritually rooted? How important was that for you?
So that I would say is really what I define myself well. Okay. How I define myself. Okay. So I would be disheartened if within 10 minutes within a conversation with anyone, a stranger or someone who knows me well, that I didn't mention that God is so important to me and that He's the one who speaks into my life in order for me to give me the strength and the wisdom and the understanding to do what I have to do. Because ultimately, there are two different things. There is your assignment in life, which is very specific. Okay, so people talk about purpose and assignment, and there's probably 1,000 books written on it. Right? So my purpose, I believe, what God has told me my purpose is to encourage and inspire. I'm an encourager. I love to encourage people, and I love to inspire people. An assignment is very different. It's specifically go to this place. It's like an assignment. I put you, like when you have a news assignment, they send you to a specific place for a specific story. It's very specific. But what I realized was really helping to encourage people, giving them hope and understanding through what God has given me, using my own life story as a testimony to let them know that they are more than their job, they are more than their parents, they're more than their last name. That daily inspiration, that all of these different stops I make in my career are just another post for me to inspire people. So it's less about the career and more about the encouragement. Because I wake up as an encourager. That's who I am. My assignment and my purpose, both, are to encourage and uplift people. Where I land is not that important. So I know that when I'm blooming in this particular place, I am fully bloomed when I've touched all of the people who I need to touch and encourage. And I won't leave there until I've done that and until I've learned my lessons, because it goes both ways. So there are things that I need to do to mature and to grow, in the profession and, as, individually. I need to be better about things, it could be anything from learning a craft to learning to be forgiving to people, learning to understand people's differences. We get a lot of young kids that come through our studios and, they'll ask very inappropriate questions, I feel like. So how much do you make? But instead of getting angry, I have to realize that this is a world where they think money is everything. And I'll say to them, that's not as important as me loving this job, because no amount of money can keep you happy. So I use it as a way to pivot. So until I've done what I need to do in that place, blooming is not just learning my craft. It's have I been able to mature as a person in that place. And when all my work is done, then I'll be planted somewhere else and I'll have to bloom there. So it's less about the gig and more about self-development.
Man, I'm just going to take a moment to breathe, because I felt that. I felt every bit of just, because there's something even in that about just presence, right? And you being present in those moments. But your presence is almost on another level of like where you feel these things. And like I was gonna ask, how do you know when your time somewhere is up or it's time to do the next thing? Like, is it all spiritual? Is it all I'm listening to God and I'm feeling, or are there physical telltales that you can see? Like what is that like for you when you know, okay, I've done all that I am supposed to do here, or all that I've been called here to do, it's time to move on?
Okay, so that's a great question. I just was just on a Zoom call with a very frustrated coworker who felt that he was not being heard at work. He was not being advanced. He's a person of color, and other people were being, promoted. And he's young, and he was really angry. And maybe he's been in the business 5 years. And I just told him, well, I've been in the business for 30 years. And sometimes it's not all about the career. It's about what your personal life is. So when I was raising my daughter, moving ahead didn't mean so much. Stability meant something. So maybe I'm a caretaker for my mother passed, but I'm a caretaker for my father. So maybe this is not a good time to move because this helps me balance out my life. So some things are work, work life, and work and life balance, work-life balance. So that's important too. But when you are more specifically to answer your question, when you go to a place and you evaluate, you have to, let me stop. You have to have mentors. Let me start with that. So you
mentors.
You have to find people. I tell this to college kids. You have to find people right now. There have to, it's all the things. You shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. You have to find people who are willing to sow into your life, who you can give your frustrations to, who can help reset you. If not, everything you experience will be an offense. You will not go far. Because everywhere you go, there will be difficult people. There will be people who don't like you. There'll be people who don't want you to advance. If you're leaving a job for those reasons, not a good idea to leave a job. It's not a good idea.
And not to cut you off, I was literally just, because we're in a personal space at this point. There's no cameras here. I was having this conversation with my oldest nephew, who was going through some frustrations at his job, and more so with his manager and things of that nature. And I was just telling him, because he's like, I'll just go get another job. I was like, wherever you end up next, you're gonna have the same problem. It's gonna be the same situation. So until you learn how to deal with and navigate these situations, they'll just follow you. And I would say that about your flaws follow you, your inefficiencies follow you, the same way all of your qualities follow you. So it just finds different ways to show up. So I feel like dealing with those things and just knowing knowing that you have to settle and you have to solve things in those moments, I think is a key thing. I didn't want to take you off track.
No, not at all.
I feel like that's just another important thing, because we think that uprooting our environment or changing our surroundings or changing our settings will change the issues, when we're not looking internally enough to kind of figure those things out.
Well, here's the thing. If you've got a problem in life and you're overwhelmed in wherever space you are and you go on vacation, you go with you. You take you, which means the problem goes with you.
Exactly.
Here's the blessing of the mentor. Let's take, it's your nephew.
Yep.
Your nephew's frustrated. And let's say I'm his mentor. You know, Miss Myriam, I'm Miss Myriam by now, right? So,
You're Miss Myriam. We're
in
at the Miss Myriam
mode,
phase. We made it.
So he says to me, I am so frustrated, I can't take it anymore. The first thing you have to do is you have someone that's saying, the mentor,
Yep.
I would have to validate how he feels. I'm not going to immediately tell him to get over himself. He's got valid things, and that's something as elders we have to realize.
Yep.
You got to hear people out.
Have to.
You can't be so quick to to dismiss people's, things that bother them, things that hurt them. I have to give him a chance to get it all out.
Yep.
And the mentor says, you have some valid points.
Yep.
And you offer someone a different way to look at it. Have you considered the fact that maybe this person doesn't know how you feel?
Yeah.
Have you considered the fact that maybe this is just the way the person reacts? Have you written down what it is that you really want? Have you articulated, what it is that you're looking for? Do you know if there's any, if there's upward mobility here? Have you looked outside of this company? Maybe your time is through. Maybe it's not. Have you looked maybe to move to another department?
Right.
Maybe there's something you can learn somewhere else. Right. Do you think that looking at your last two jobs, you seem very defiant? It seems like this thing keeps coming up in your career. Have you considered that it's maybe you, looking at the trajectory and the things that so you've got to be that mentor to really give priceless words of wisdom, because there has to be self-reflection. It's not always somebody else's fault.
Right.
Sometimes it's just you.
Right.
I was saying the other day, and I think we were talking about this, 10% is the devil and 90% is us.
Yes.
Right. It's not just, it's not, we can't blame the devil for everything.
Right.
So, and that's the thing, we're influenced by a lot of people. But again, with my career, it was bloom there. And then when it was time to go, and I knew it was, I went someplace else, and I didn't hesitate in starting from the bottom.
Yeah.
Because you learn everybody else's job. And the blessing in learning everybody else's job is that when you get to that next level, you can better evaluate those people who work with you.
Yeah.
And I believe that when you float under the radar, because everybody wants a title, everybody wants to be seen, you want to grow under the radar. Because by the time you get there, and people forget, there's no going back. Right. Whatever you haven't learned, whatever you haven't been able to figure out, will be on full display.
Right.
Right. So that means they will highlight your achievements and your mistakes.
Yeah.
Get the mistakes while you're blooming.
Right.
That way you don't have to make them, when you're higher up.
And that was a lot of knowledge. And as you're speaking, I'm literally like cycling through my career and things that I probably could have handled, better. And even back to the mentor piece, I feel good because those are the exact things I was able to say to my nephew and help him see it in another way, which I think, going forward for him, he won't have those issues. And I'm thinking about what a conversation like this would have done for me at 23 or 24 years old, and like even down to don't be afraid to start back at the bottom, right? Because, and then I'll go back to the Haitian versus the American. The American kid is taught not to go backwards when it's technically not going backwards because you're learning and you're still gathering skills, right? But it's like, no, once I make, director, or once I make senior director, I can't go back. I've heard people, I've said it myself, I can't make less than this to do this. And it's like, why not? Because there's so much more to gain. And I think I've had to evolve that mindset myself in the past couple of years, but to see kind of what your mindset, it's no shock to me that you are where you are, and you're where you are because of who you are. And just having those things like instilled in you from a youth, and then you're able now to pass it down to others is amazing. And it's an incredible it's an incredible just example of the beacon that you are to people. And yeah, I don't have a question to follow that. That was just.
Can I share with you something
Sure.
recently? And this is just to punctuate that everything that you do in your life has value, whether you can see it or not. I mean, a Christian, something that we talk about as Christians is when the Bible talks about things working for your good.
Yep.
All things working.
All
for
things work together for the good of those. Yep.
Yes, correct. And there's more to that scripture. I'm just, and and I don't want to just hang it there. There's more to the scripture. But if I know that every situation works for my good, then even though it seems like a failure or it seems like I haven't taken full advantage, that it will help me at some point in time. So that means there's nothing is lost.
Right.
God nothing is a waste in Christ.
Right.
He uses everything. Recently, I worked on a production. I went in more as a director.
Okay.
But I've been a musician my whole life. I sing and I sing and I play the piano, and I took years of dance.
Right.
So I walk into this production setting, and I'm helping to kind of give some creative vision, but I'm able to talk to the musicians and have a musical conversation. Now, I didn't do music my whole life, but I have enough of a musical, to have that conversation. And those musicians really connect with me because I'm speaking their language. This production also had some dance. So one of the dancers, I was kind of giving her some, just some pointers on, some way she should do something artistic, like how she should execute something.
Yep.
And the choreographers were so excited that I was speaking their language that immediately I was able to connect with the entire cast because I had enough dance and enough music. And when I spoke to some of the other, production people, we all had the same conversation. So I was having 3 different conversations because what God had poured into me starting at 8 years old, nothing was wasted. So at some point in life, it will show up. So there's nothing there's no leftovers. It all goes in this melting pot and you get access to it when you need it, it shows up.
And nothing is to waste. And just because it's not being used at that time, or it may not be even being used for what you initially intended to use it for, it's still immensely valuable. And that to me, I'm as I'm hearing you, I'm thinking that that's just you walking in your purpose, and then your purpose is leading you to even greater purpose and some assignments, like where we were talking about purpose versus assignment earlier. I want to talk a little more into career, and kind of off script, but what are you most proud of about your career?
That God had everything to do with it and I had nothing to do with it. I would love to take credit. It would make me happy to say that I was so amazing and wonderful that I just did this all by myself. Yeah. But literally, I really just trusted God to plant me till I got to the next step. Literally. It's really, if I really believe that what it is God has to be able to trust you. If God can trust you, He will allow you to operate in a place where He knows He won't lose you. I say to people all the time,
Can you say that one more time?
Okay.
I'm going to quote you tonight.
Okay, sure. No problem. God will be happy to put you in a place where He won't lose you. He wants you, he happily wants to give you that dream, but He won't facilitate it if He knows He will lose you in that spot, that you will bless the gift and not the giver. And at the end, if He loses you, then you're lost. Yeah. Because it only works if He's involved. Yeah. If this is something that God gives you, if He gives you an assignment, gives you a purpose, and it's His doing and not your manipulation, then He is obligated by His word to provide for you in that space. Right. But when you manufacture it, you on your own strength are not going to be able to do what it does, to sustain it. Right. You may get the gig, but you won't be able to sustain it. That's different than me lying and cheating and, dare I say, people, doing things they shouldn't be doing to climb their way to the top. Right. Now, here's the thing. If I do all of these things to climb, I got to keep that up to stay. But if God gives this to me, then he's obligated to, one of the scriptures says, the heart of the king is in the hands of the Lord, and he will turn it any which way he wants. So the guy you think that hates you can wake up because God will touch his heart and say, I've seen you in the office and I don't know what you do, but I want to take a chance on you. God will give you what's greater than money, which is favor. Favor will allow someone to do something for you that no one else will do. You don't need money, you need favor.
You need favor. And
favor, that changes the trajectory of everything. So to follow that, when I started in the production world, I felt like I really wanted to be a musician, but I wanted to eat. So this whole, if you make it and you don't.
Right. You didn't want to be a starving artist.
Right, absolutely, right. And exactly. And I did see that, what if people don't like my music? And as a musician, you have to grow. You have to be okay with your sound. You have to find your sound. But I also, in the back of my head, I got to make my parents proud that I'm standing on my own 2 feet.
Right.
So I do need to work and I need to find a job and sustain myself. So I started in production, and now I start doing these musical productions. And vividly, I remember seeing the greatest musicians on that stage. I was so excited, but I was hurt at some point, and I thought, but God, why didn't you let me, be up there? Like, I was like, you're letting me work with the greatest musicians. And by the way, I'm there in more as a director, and they are, following my instructions. And these are, these artists are pretty high up in the industry. So I really want to trade places with you. I really don't want to be here. But I was gaining their respect, and I never crossed the line. I never said, can you listen to my project? I wanted their respect, and I wanted their trust in the space that I was in. Most of them would have never known that I did music at all. But one night when I was praying, and I was really heartbroken, the Lord spoke to me and he said, it's not that I didn't want that for you or that I don't, but I knew that if I released you, I would have lost you there. Because I was so enamored with music and musicians that I could have sold my soul to that. So now I'm much more mature. And production, I was not enamored with at all. Celebrity, none of that bothered me. Because what I really want was the affirmation of my parents more than the affirmation of the world. And as I get older, it's God's affirmation that you want. And so once he tells you, just by being my child, you are affirmed. And this is what everybody's missing. They're all looking for affirmation. But once he affirms you, then you can just go and do, this thing of purpose and assignment. I want people to really understand your purpose is to get up every day and to be the best person that God has created you to do. He has laid out the roadmap for you. The Bible inspires you, instructs you, everything you need to know about a situation. I guarantee you somebody's already gone through it. Your mentor is there to enforce. He's there to have an open and listening ear. He's there to encourage you. So your job, your purpose is to get up and walk the road that God has placed before you. And your job is to bloom till you're moved to something else.
Bloom where you're planted.
That's it. This thing of I don't have my purpose. You do have a purpose.
Every day.
Every day. I mean, that is your purpose. So I feel like young people get lost. I mean, I shouldn't leave it to young people. There's still people feeling like they've missed out on something. But remember, everything is working for your good. So what could you possibly be missing?
So you're not missing anything.
No. Only in your mind you think, or if someone tells you that you're missing something.
And that's because of either what someone else has told you or a false set of expectation and or even comparison, right? You're comparing yourself to someone else's situation, or you're seeing what God has done for another person, and you take that as you should be getting that too. But in your saying, when you're walking in your purpose, and your purpose is what you're doing every day, and it's to be the best possible person you can be that God's created you to be, you don't miss anything.
Now, you talked about comparison. Dangerous. We do it and don't even realize that we're doing it. I can tell you, as a woman, I feel like women are super hard on other women. The level of insecurity is so deep, runs so deep, that when I usually meet other women, I go out of my way I don't mind bearing my soul to them. And inevitably, whatever they think, whatever they believe I am, based on, how they see me, they're always surprised. Really, you've suffered this? And immediately, if I can meet you at our mutual point of suffering, our mutual point of struggle, that is the great equalizer, because we can build on that foundation. So now we're two struggling women with our own personal, difficulties. And now, since we are more alike than we are different, let's help each other, because you make me better and I make you better. There always has to be the strategy to equalize yourself with people. Otherwise, it's just, all these perceptions that we can't work with that.
Yeah. And you said something when we were speaking earlier this morning. It was to the effect of share your pain. And obviously you have to go share it where you feel safe to share it.
Absolutely. Not with everybody.
Not
where
with,
you feel led.
Not with Instagram.
Yes.
But where you,
no, never. No, not at all.
And I thought that was just so poignant, and like a way that I've never thought about, even finding commonality with people, right? And it's so obvious now, as you said it and I see it, because that's one thing that we all, as Black people, we all share, right? We share pain, we share trauma. So there's always like that common bond and a space to build on top of it. But I just don't think that's the common view that we have of it. And because of that, like the comparison, which also is a byproduct of jealousy and all of those things. So like those things are conditioned in us. I won't say they're built in us, but we've been conditioned to kind of have those things. So I guess that leads me into, for someone like yourself in your profession, where you said people who looked like you, that wasn't important to you. Were there ever times where you did have either a conflict or a situation with someone who did look like you, and that kind of got you into thinking like the person who looks like you may hurt you more?
Right.
Did that ever happen to you, or did you have an experience like that?
Well, my mother used to say to me, because she felt that, coming out of college, I was very Afrocentric, that, everything was about, and she said, be very careful.
Yeah.
Because not everyone who looks like you is out for you.
Yeah.
So
skin folk ain't kinfolk.
That's exactly correct.
All skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Right. And so I still felt that I was willing to take the chance on people who look like me, because I felt that, but when I connected with them, I felt like, isn't pain more our humanity than our success? Our pain is our humanity.
Yes.
That's what makes us human. Not every success, it has ups and downs, and not everybody's definition of success is the same.
Right.
Right. But if pain is our humanity, and and again, humility goes a long way. The less you say about what you do, the less you feel like, I told someone the other day, I don't vet resumes, I vet hearts.
Yes.
So if you come to me with your long list of accomplishments, you have already been disqualified. You are immediately disqualified, because maybe your resume will hurt you in that you think that you can do what I'm asking you to do better. Maybe it's better you don't have that long resume and you're moldable and teachable.
Right.
So that's why a resume doesn't. Now, I understand there are instances you have to say that you're qualified.
Right.
If this is a technical job, you know, there's computer language.
Right.
But if you're trying to impress me, you're really sometimes showing me more of an insecurity, because if you come with humility, if you say, listen, I'm grateful to be here. I'm here to learn, or more importantly, I'm here to serve. Then I'm willing to give you all that I have.
Yeah.
You're not coming to take over. You're not coming to tell me that you can do it better than I can.
Right.
Because then I'm going to be out to show you can't.
Right.
So you come that way, and to understand that people at a certain age want to hold, they want to hand over a legacy.
Yeah.
They want to. They're just looking for the humble heart to give it to.
Right.
It's not that they're not trying to teach you. It's that you haven't proven that, you're willing and you're able, and that you're humble enough to want to learn that they're, be open to learning.
Yep.
So that's the difficulty.
And you mentioned leaving a legacy, and that's probably the last thing I want to ask you, because I have opinions on legacy, and my thought is always, like, I would always think about what would people say at my funeral, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you're a shining example of your legacy being about who you were and how you made people feel, as opposed to what you did, right? And like we think about legacy, you think about children and leaving them a house and leaving them these things, but there's so many things that are more valuable to leave. So in my last question to you, we're I don't know, 100 years from now, we're talking about Miss Myriam. We're honoring Miss Myriam. What is it that you would like people to say your legacy was?
I would like people to say that my legacy was shifting the atmosphere. That when I entered a room, that more important than who was in the room was that I could connect with you and help you to feel better about something, inspire you, encourage you. You know, that when I was around, you felt better. That, you know, you felt that you could do anything. That I had given you enough of myself to help inspire and encourage you. Because that means I will keep living. I mean, I'll always live on. And whatever I've given you, I always tell people when young people, I'm going to help you. I see that you really want help. I'm going to help you. All I ask is that you help someone else.
Yes.
And so that means it never ends.
Yes.
That means you're training this generation. I'm going to give you this for free because I want you to have it because somebody gave it to me. And so if you would in turn, I don't want anything else from you except for you to hand it to somebody, to pay it forward.
Yes.
So
important.
If you're in a room of people who you've given and paid it forward, then your presence alone should make the difference. It doesn't have to be also what, you know, you gave them, you know, or some job you did. It could just be that you are a listening ear. But that when you come into a room, you shift the atmosphere, that everyone feels slightly more encouraged, they feel better.
Well, I can assure you that I will say that
Thanks.
in your honor.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for this. This
this
was
was great
incredible.
for me.
This wasn't planned for all those who don't.
Yes, it
know,
was
but
not.
It wasn't our plan. We
No,
should say
definitely not a COVID plan.
No, it wasn't a COVID plan.
It was not a COVID plan.
But
it
thank
was a
you,
blessing to me.
thank you so much. You've
Oh,
been a
you're
blessing
welcome. Thank
to
you so much.
Chantel and I. You've been a blessing to this home. We feel it, like we've been saying all day. We just feel you shifted the energy. We feel a presence. I was telling LaShawn on the way over here, like, the apartment's going to feel a little different, and not because we move furniture, but because there's just a presence and a shift, and
I thank God for that.
And a belief, and we know we've drained you. It's been about 72 hours.
No, it's okay. I feel energized.
You pouring into us, but thank you so much, Miss Myriam.
Thank you.
We know we haven't mentioned where people can find you if you want to be found. Do you want to share maybe any social media profiles where people can find you? Instagram.
I love Instagram.
Okay.
At Director Leger, Leger.
Okay.
On Instagram. And I don't know, Gram is just easy.
Yeah, Instagram is easy.
It's just easy.
Dangerous, but easy.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
So they can find you there at Director Leger, Leger. I can't stop saying thank you.
Oh no,
I love you.
My
this was
amazing. I love you more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chantel.
And I have to shout out Chantel.
We have to.
I have to shout out Chantel.
We have to,
because she is, as you know, she's an amazing blessing.
Yes.
But
to all of us.
When I get discouraged about where I see young women going in the world, she's a reminder to me that the greatness is in young women is destined to come forward.
Absolutely.
No matter where they find themselves in the moment, that ultimately they are destined for greatness. She has, I cannot wait to see what God is going to do in her life.
Same.
She pours into young people. God gives her incredible wisdom. She has not even reached the pinnacles of what God has for her.
No.
I think God sometimes he hides what he has for us because it would blow our mind.
Yeah.
I shared with someone the other day, when you really put your faith and your trust in God and you really say, you know, I'm going to let you take this career and you send me wherever you want to send me, you know, this job that I have, help me to inspire, encourage, then think of a cup, and then the saucer under it. Yeah. When God fills up that cup and it fills up to the top and it flows over, that in God you can live from the overflow. You don't even have to access what's in the cup.
What's in it?
You live from the saucer so much that you'll never have to go into that cup. You will live from the overflow that God has poured into you if you're an open vessel for him to pour into. And that is what she's about to live, from the overflow.
She is. I used to tell her, like, when we first met, how not only was she changing children's lives, but she was changing and saving the world. And I think she thought that was game at the time, but I just meant that in the little bit that I got to see. And like, I say to her now, even in moments where, the world is dark, I'm like, your best days are ahead of you. And what you're going to do after this is going to be much greater, and that we can't even imagine.
One
what
thing
it is.
I must say that she does, she knows when she's on empty.
Yeah.
And as a woman, you are a provider. You're someone who's always pouring into people's lives. Every woman should know when they're on E. They have to fill up and know who to allow to pour into them before they hit E. That is something you better learn as a young woman before you become an older woman. I'll stop there.
Are you crying?
No, I was going to say she keeps you off of E. You're like, oh.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Again, this was phenomenal. I'm going to go back and rewatch this several times, and as I call you and try to
Yes, I'm here.
figure my
you
life
have me
out.
off whenever, forever.
Yes,
You and
thank
Chantel forever.
Thank you. And
Yes,
Della.
yes,
And
Stella.
And
Yes.
LaShawn now.
Yes,
'Cause
LaShawn.
needs
LaShawn.
it.
LaShawn, you're in the family now. It's a wrap. LaShawn, Della. Shout out to Della. We love
I was
Della.
going to say, we still have 2 more that you have
Yes.
to meet, so we're doing good here.
Okay.
Charles, we're good. We can wrap.
Okay.
We're good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.